The Silly Penguin has put together a list of 25 books that we feel will definitely be worth reading before a new lifetime. Dating all the way back to 1908, you will surely take pleasure out of each and every one of the pages from these books. The books are in no specific order, you can rate them from 1 to 25 yourself. How many of these have you already read? Feel free to comment if you feel that there are any important books that we left out on this list. Enjoy reading. 25. The Nightingale. The Nightingale is a novel, written by Kristen Hanna and published in 2015. It tells the story of two sisters in France during World War II, and their struggle to survive and resist the German occupation of France. 24. In Search of Lost Time. This novel is written by Marcel Proust and is considered to be his most prominent work. In Search of Lost Time follows the narrator's recollections of childhood and experiences into adulthood, during late 19th century to early 20th century France, while reflecting on the loss of time and lack of meaning to the world. 23. Mrs. Dalloway. Mrs. Dalloway is a novel written by Virginia Woolf that details a day in the life of Clarissa Dalloway, a fictional high society woman in post-First World War England. It is one of Woolf's best-known novels. 22. The Last Olympian. The Last Olympian is a fantasy adventure novel based on Greek mythology by Rick Riordan. It is the fifth and final novel of the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, and serves as the direct sequel to the Battle of the Labyrinth. The Last Olympian revolves around the demigod Percy Jackson as he leads his friends in the last stand to protect Mount Olympus. 21. The Stories by Anton Chekhov. Compactness, outstanding humor, irony and rich content make Anton Chekhov's stories unique with no equals in the world of literature. 20. Beloved. Beloved is a 1987 novel by the American writer Toni Morrison. Set after the American Civil War, it is inspired by the life of Margaret Garnor, an African American who escaped slavery in Kentucky in late January 1856 by crossing the Ohio River to Ohio, a free state. 19. The Name of the Wind. The Name of the Wind, also called the Kingkiller Chronicle, Day 1, is a heroic fantasy novel written by American author Patrick Rothfuss. The story wraps around a man's life, exploring his journey from childhood into adolescence, and a little of the way into maturity. The universe in which this story is set is beautifully and articulately created. 18. Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. This novel by Mark Twain is noted for its colorful description of people and places along the Mississippi River. Set in a southern antebellum society that had ceased to exist over 20 years before the work was published, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is an often scathing satire on entrenched attitudes, particularly racism. 17. Don Quixote. Don Quixote is a Spanish novel by Miguel de Cervantes. The plot revolves around the adventures of a man from La Mancha, who reads so many romances that he loses his mind and decides to become a knight-errant to revive chivalry and serve his nation, under the name Don Quixote de la Mancha. 16. Clockwork Princess. This is a fantasy novel written by Cassandra Clare. It is written in the third person through the perspective of the main protagonist, Tessa Gray, who resides in the Shadowhunters London Institute. This plot follows Tessa and her friends as they face off against the series' main antagonist, who plans to completely obliterate the Shadowhunter race. 15. Middlemarch. Middlemarch, a study of provincial life, is a novel by the English author George Eliot. Set in a fictitious Midlands town from 1829 to 1832, it follows distinct, intersecting stories with many characters. Issues include the status of women, the nature of marriage, idealism, self-interest, religion, hypocrisy, political reform, and education. 14. Invisible Man. Invisible Man, written by Ralph Ellison, addresses many of the social and intellectual issues faced by the African Americans in the early 20th century, including Black nationalism, the relationship between Black identity and Marxism, and the reformist racial policies of Booker T. Washington, as well as issues of individuality and personal identity. 13. The Way of Kings. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson is the first volume in a projected 10-book epic fantasy series, set on the world of Roshar, where constant storms have caused the ecology to evolve into something resembling a rock pool or a coral reef. 12. Gingerbread. In her novel, Gingerbread, Helen Oyemi writes about the story of Hansel and Gretel, the classic German fairy tale about a brother and sister who make a violent escape from a witch's house. Her novel isn't a retelling, rather, it approaches the story with the sly obliqueness that's become one of the writer's trademarks. 11. A Court of Mist and Fury. Sarah J. Maas wrote the book, A Court of Mist and Fury. It revolves around a woman, who survived bad clutches to return to the Spring Court, but at a steep cost. Though she now has the powers of the Hi-Fi, her heart remains human, and it can't forget the terrible deeds she performed in the past. 10. The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby is a 1925 novel written by American author F. Scott Fitzgerald that follows a cast of characters living in the fictional towns of West Egg and East Egg on prosperous Long Island in the summer of 1922. The story primarily concerns the young and mysterious millionaire Jay Gatsby, and his idealistic passion and obsession with the beautiful girl known as Daisy Buchanan. 9. 100 Years of Solitude. A landmark 1967 novel by Colombian author Gabriel Garcia Marquez that tells the multi-generational story of the A family, whose patriarch, Jose Arcadio Buendia, founded the town of Mecanto, a fictitious town in the country of Colombia. 8. A Game of Thrones. This was the first novel in A Song of Ice and Fire, a series of fantasy novels by the American author George R.R. Martin. In the novel, recounting events from various points of view, Martin introduces the plotlines of the noble houses of Westeros, the Wall, and the Targaryens. Throughout the novel, characters are often faced with decisions that match one redeemable trait against another. 7. War and Peace. This novel, written by Leo Tolstoy, chronicles the French invasion of Russia and the impact of the Napoleonic era on Tsarist society through the stories of 5 Russian aristocratic families. 6. Lolita. Lolita is a novel written by Russian-American novelist Vladimir Nabokov. The novel is notable for its controversial subject. The protagonist and unreliable narrator, a middle-aged literature professor under the pseudonym Humbert Humbert, is obsessed with a 12-year-old girl, Dolores Hayes, with whom he becomes sexually involved after he becomes her stepfather. Lolita is his private nickname for Dolores. 5. Underland. Written by Robert Macfarlane, Underland is, as its title suggests, a book about burial and unburial and deep time, the awful darkness inside the world, to study the places where we have long placed that which we fear and wish to lose, and that which we love and wish to save. 4. The Help. The Help is a 2009 novel by American author Catherine Stockett. The story is about African Americans working in white households in Jackson, Mississippi, during the early 1960s. 3. To Kill a Mockingbird. Written by Harper Lee, the plot and characters are loosely based on Lee's observations of her family, her neighbors, and an event that occurred near her hometown of Monroeville, Alabama, in 1936, when she was 10. Despite dealing with the serious issues of rape and racial inequality, the novel is renowned for its warmth and humor. 2. Anna Karenina. Many writers consider Anna Karenina the greatest work of literature ever. Leo Tolstoy called it his first true novel. It deals with themes of betrayal, faith, family, marriage, Imperial Russian society, desire, and rural versus city life. The plot centers on an extramarital affair between Anna and dashing cavalry officer Count Alexei Kirillovich Vronsky that scandalizes the social circles of St. Petersburg and forces the young lovers to flee to Italy in a search for happiness. 1. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Harry Potter is leaving Privet Drive for the last time. But as he climbs into the sidecar of Hagrid's motorbike and they take to the skies, he knows Lord Voldemort and the Death Eaters will not be far behind. This fantasy novel was written by British author J.K. Rowling.